Broadcasting from Baltimore, Maryland, this is 5x3 Radio, where strength is for everyone. I'm your host, Emily Sokolinski, owner of 5x3 Training, a strength and conditioning gym in Baltimore, along with my co-host, Rebecca Fishburne, founder of Cornerstone Strength Maryland. Each week, Rebecca and I will discuss the ins and outs of strength training, why there is a no one-size-fits-all approach, and why strength is so important in our daily lives. Thanks for spending some time with us today. Now, on with the show. All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome back. 5x3 Radio. Rebecca and I are here once again. We had a little hiatus for the past couple weeks. Rebecca was busy with her 4-H auction. How did it go? Quick recap.
I made it to the other side.
Yes. With that,
yeah, I don't know. So quick recap: we sold all 3 pigs. Yay! We sold the goat.
The goat. I did not have to bring the goat home to my house.
The goat did not make rate of gain. Actually, 10 out of 18 goats did not make rate of gain.
Explain that real fast if you can. Is that something we can talk about?
Yeah, I mean, I think I can do that pretty quick. But basically, I mean, you get the animals when they're small, when they're young, and then there's an average amount of weight that they should gain per day. That sort of is indicative of good health. So if they're not gaining enough weight, maybe they've gotten sick or they've got worms or they have some other issue. If they're gaining weight too quickly, that seems like maybe it wouldn't be such a bad thing. But like if they're gaining weight too quickly, maybe they're putting on mass faster than their muscle, than their bone can support.
Absolutely.
And so, that sort of thing can happen with a rapid weight gain where the bone structure just won't support it.
Sounds very similar to like what we do as humans here.
So many similarities. Yes. But so the goats, they decided this year, since rate of gain for the goats, average daily rate of gain is 1/4 pound per day, and that was a new rule this year. So they decided to waive it for 1 more year as people adjusted to that new rule. So we were able to sell the goat.
Now, you're not going to have to worry about this next year, right?
No, we are not doing any more large
girls
animals.
They're graduating this year. Oh my God.
Yeah. Well, so when Delia was a senior in high school, she still did 1 more year. They're all the twins are still eligible age-wise to do 1 more year. But when Delia did this, she just went to college 45 minutes away. She still had 2 sisters in the club. I am not washing anybody's pig the night before the pig show, though. So there will be no more pigs on it next year.
So Diego was so confused when he first learned about all this. He's like, I thought she lived on a farm. And then I was so confused,
but we do not.
Where does she keep the pig and the goat? I'm trying to picture in my mind like your house and like the barn. But I know you don't live on a farm, so how could? And then I realized it's this program 4-H. It is. For those of you who don't know about 4-H, look it up.
Yeah, there should be, like we were saying, it's like, well, there's this funny TikTok where they talk about it's the biggest gang in the Midwest.
Yeah. It's like, Rebecca and I were joking before we started this about the Real Housewives of 4-H, because there's some drama. There is some drama. It's not just students, I should say, and their animals. Parents the stories that she has told me.
Yeah, everything.
It's wild. Well, I'm glad that is done and everything went well, and you got a chance to get the goat to somebody who can take care of it.
Yeah. Now the goat is out working. The goat will be in Baltimore soon. Yeah, the goat is
doing
now
what?
part of. Yeah, because the goat is now part of like an eco squad. It's part of a company that's called Browsing Green
Nice.
Goats. And my friend Mary rents the herd out, and they will clear properties. So they're going to be clearing.
So cool.
So it's like an environmental.
That's awesome.
Operation. And there's a park or something like that in Baltimore that they're contracted
we'll have to
work on next.
We'll have to find out what park that is and take a picture of Rebecca's goat. So we thought, since it's been a couple weeks, there was an article that came out I shared with Rebecca that came out in August on the Stronger by Science website. It's if you don't know about it, it's Greg Nuckols, and I'm always blanking on the other guy's name. I want to say Eric, and I'm going to figure it out, his last name, before this is over, and maybe you can Google it for me while I'm talking. But they have a podcast, and they do a lot of discussion of different.
Goals.
So analyzing of various studies, right?
Scientific approaches.
So they do the whole scientific and nerdy side of it. And I saw the article, and it was very short. I'll have a link to it on our in the notes section of our podcast. But it mainly was addressing strength development and how additional attentional focus may influence strength development. So external focus, external cues, rather than internal. And it stuck with me. It stuck with me, and it really made me kind of sit up, because I use a lot of those external cues all the time, and I find they're more useful than internal cues for people, right? Which kind of sounds like, well, duh. I mean, that's that's coaching.
Maybe it sounds
that's
like
coaching,
maybe it doesn't,
but maybe
right?
it doesn't. I don't know. But to me, it was very clear that that works for me as a lifter, and it works for me as a coach when I'm working with my clients, especially those clients who seem to be more in their heads than I want them to be, right? Getting them to experience the movement, and not so much about like what's going on in my muscles and what's going on in my back and what's going on in my. We have to kind of like break that from them, and get them to focus on just look at the floor, just look at the wall, just think about this, and that's what I wanted to talk today about with Rebecca, is kind of review very briefly the summary of the studies, and we're not going to go into everything. There were a couple different exercises that they did.
A meta study.
Yeah,
of several
yeah.
other studies. Yeah, and Emily, it's Trexler.
Thank you, Trexler. So Eric Trexler. So Greg Nuckols and Eric Trexler do with the podcast Stronger by Science. So the summary of the studies, and Rebecca and I went through them. They're different exercise tests that they did: hand grip strength, isometric mid-thigh pull, elbow flexion. What we wanted to focus on, of course, were the squat and the deadlift part.
Yeah, it's like there's about 3 studies that they looked at that focused on squat and deadlift. And a little bit less interested in the hand grip strength exercise.
Yeah, but that's interesting, because like the hand grip strength. So I looked at that when I saw that, and I saw the external focus. Yeah. So anyways,
it's probably the most obvious difference between the cues. Like some of the cues that they give in the studies are somewhat similar, like focus on the bar rather than focus on your knees and your hips.
Exactly.
But yeah, that hand grip one, it's like focusing on your fingers or your hand versus focusing on the wall.
So we don't realize, we don't really put a name to these instructional, cues that we're giving people. We don't say, okay, I'm going to give you an external cue today. And now today I'm going to give you an internal cue. We just say it.
More like when you're working with the person, it's just like, intuitive or something in the moment. Like,
right.
Okay, I just tried a cue. That one didn't work. Or I feel like this person is too much in their head. I'm going to try and get them to focus on something else.
Exactly.
You're freaking out about their low back, so I'm going to get them to focus on their puffing up their chest, or the other side of the.
Getting them to think outside, getting them to get out of their head and focus on what they're actually physically doing while they're performing this lift. Yeah. So I really wanted to address kind of the difference between the external and the internal focus, because this might be, some people might be like, well, what does she mean? So one of the studies they did was on the squat and the deadlift, and it was a run 1 rep max. And an external focus instruction would be focus your attention on pulling the bar up. And I'm like, well, duh, that's something that we say all the time, right? So pulling the slack out of the bar, that would be an external instruction, right? Feel the bar in your hand. For the squat, focus on moving and exerting force through and against the barbell. So that would be, pulling the bar down.
Dive into the bar.
Yeah, pull the bar down as you're going into the squat, and drive up into the bar when you're coming out of the squat. So external, like the bar is on my back. I know it's on my back. I have to remind myself that I need to push against this weight. Internal cue for the deadlift, focus your attention on extending your knees and hips. Okay, well, that's fine. I might just say, send your butt up in the air. And that's would be more of like a, external. We know where that is. Take it up. Squat, focus on moving and exerting force through your legs. Yeah, how would we really say that? That's a lot of language for somebody. That's not going to really
to me,
give them.
that's just very vague.
Exactly.
Like,
Exactly.
with your legs, and we give some, I mean, I guess they're external cues, right? Like if we're talking about somebody's balance, we're asking them to think about their foot on the floor,
Right.
but we're really kind of focusing their attention on the floor.
Right.
Like, are you
Right.
in your toes? Are you in your heels?
Right.
Like, you feel more pressure forward or backward as opposed to.
And I think that if I'm giving an external cue versus an internal cue, I'm going to get a lot more out of that person, right? If I can say to them, pull the bar into your hands. Well, their hands are on the bar. They can feel that slack, whether it's out or taking the click out. I use that a lot. Like I'll literally say, come closer so you can hear it. And I'll pull the click out. I'll pull the bar into my hands. They go, oh, I hear that. Yeah. Listen for that. External. Listen for that. Listen for that. You know the bar is now in your hands. Now you can push up the floor. I think when you're telling somebody, focus on pushing with your legs. Well, I might use that way down the road, right? I might say, okay, now think about your legs aren't pushing, but I really want you to just think about driving your shoulders up into the bar. I want you to feel that bar like on your back and you're pushing against it. So the internal cue might come kind of after the external cue.
Well, and even with like the starting strength teaching method for the squat, right? Like when you're trying to teach hip drive, you're not getting into a lot of verbiage about, okay, you're going to use these muscles. It's going to feel this way. Like you
Right.
put some hands on the person's sacrum and you're like, push into my hands. That's an external cue. Right. So you're taking the whole concept of what's supposed to happen with hip drive and you're turning it into something external. Like
right. And in fact, with the hip drive, as Diego has been saying at the past couple of camps that we've been doing, really it should be knee extension drive. Because what's happening when you actually come out of the squat, your knees are extending. So your knees extend and then your hips extend, right? You can't do hip extension before you do knee extension. If not, if you do that.
See, this is the sort of example right there where you're talking about an internal cue.
Right.
Your knees are extending or flexing is something, I mean, maybe that makes sense. Flexing makes sense to the street, but extension doesn't usually make sense to a lot of people.
Right. So I demonstrate that. So I'll demonstrate that. I'll get into a squat and I'll put my fingers on my knees and I'll basically I go knee extension, like lock out. And then what happens to my hips then? They come up. Oh, okay. Makes sense. And, I do want to say, we're talking about getting people stronger. So we're not talking about bodybuilding. Bodybuilders do focus on their muscles, right? That is part of their thing. So for them, the internal focus might be much, much stronger and more apt to help them than this external, because they're not really worried about strength. They're worried about muscles. They're worried about feeling that tricep. They're worried about that quad. So for them, they're probably going to lean more towards an internal focus than an external focus.
I feel as though I cannot speak on this.
But I'm just saying, I want to put that out there that we're not talking about that. We're talking about coaching. We're talking about the compound movements that we teach: the squat, the press, the bench, the deadlift, and how we cue them. And that external focus definitely seems to help people perform better, right? It gets them to move better.
I think a lot of times, just like you're kind of describing in your hypothetical bodybuilder situation, a lot of times people are already too much in their head about particular parts of their body.
Yes.
And even just people in the general public.
Yes.
Right? Like you talk to people in the general public who don't know the names of any of the muscles or their function or any of that sort of stuff. And they'll tell you about specific parts. Well, I mean, if you're having this sort of conversation,
right.
They would tell you about specific parts of their body that they don't really like or wish this looked, so people are already kind of very focused on compartmentalizing their body. And so it's this idea of getting out of that habit of thinking and instead focusing on moving as a unit on the action as opposed to the individual body part.
Exactly. And I think that's why, we're talking about building strength. So you're talking about full body movements.
Yeah.
Pushing, squatting, so using an external focus is, I find, way more effective to get what I need to get across to somebody, when they're pressing. And if someone's having a hard time staying out of the bar's way, right? Because, we utilize the hips when we press. We've got the bounce. We want the bar to go back, not up. So I'm going to tell people, look up. Now, I don't just say look up. I say look up and look at that point on the wall. In my gym, I have a crane. There's a nice little hoist, the crane's still there in the warehouse.
You may want to explain. It's like, yeah, it's a warehouse.
It's a warehouse. So I'll say, look at the crane, or I have a bunch of posters now on my wall. So I'll say, look above the poster. Look at the thumbtack, in the poster. That's quite high up, right? If there's a mark on the wall, look at that mark on the wall. So people have this external focus. So that way they're staring. Yeah.
At one of the locations where I work, I have possibly been known to doodle on the wall.
Oh, so people put tape on my wall, and then it takes off the paint, though. So
well, but if you used painter's tape,
yes, painter's tape is best. But people have done that. Like before I got the posters, they would put something on the wall. So there's that external. Because if I just say look up, I could be anywhere. If I give them a specific point to look at, now the focus is there. Now the body can do what it needs to do, right? Or if they're looking down when they squat. Some people like to put their water bottle or a weight or something there, something shiny on the floor to stare at, because
shiny objects well for catching people's attention.
So again, but it's something that I don't even think about, right? Do I use our internal instructions, useful? Of course they are. Of course. I mean, sometimes I need to tell somebody, think about holding the bar with your fingers. Like when they're benching, like think about your fingers, focus on the fingers. But then it goes back to external focus, hold on to the bar, right? So there's kind of like, it's both are useful. It's when we get into trying to get inside into the muscles and do this and do that. Well, how am I supposed to on the bench? Just push into the bench, hands under the shoulders, push into my shoulders. Okay, that's how how much tension I want you to have. You start messing around with like poking this and prying this, and people can take that, and then they're trying to find that right position when the scapula are just in the right spot, and they've.
Yeah, I mean, like honestly, I just did this afternoon with Todd because he was pressing, and I was trying to get like that idea of like squeeze your chest up, your chest up to the ceiling, and he was kind of. Well, and he was trying to do that, but like it was not at all looking like what I wanted. So, you go through the series of various cues, but each different cue like just produced some other different movement that I wasn't happy about either. And I was like, never mind. I was like, look, let's just skip that cue. Let's pretend I never said anything about, I was like, like your back is supporting the bar, and it was like, never mind. I was like, all you need to do is stand up tall.
Exactly.
And he's like, okay.
Yeah. And that's sometimes just what it is. It's like you have to, because, and I pull out a whole bunch of different, cues because something's going to stick. But I definitely always seem to gravitate towards that external focus for people, because if I try to get to feel the thighs on the, focus, it goes like right over their heads. So I think that by getting out of our heads and just focusing on, I'm going to look at that point on the wall. I'm going to feel the bar in my hands. I'm going to pull the click out of the bar. That's easy for me to feel and hear. That's good. There's a little the
auditory.
The auditory. Exactly. The auditory cue. I love that. People say slack. People don't know what the hell that slack means. I say take the click out of the bar. Oh. And then they realize what that actually is. I said, it's the, and the breathing, especially with breathing, external focus. Take a breath. Just take a breath. Actually, I say with the deadlift, once that click is out, your breath just takes care of itself. You don't need to take a big breath when you're down there. You take that slack out, you're tight. You're tight. Your breath's it's already going to happen. You're already going to take a breath because you've just pulled this weight into your hands. You do it hard enough, the breath will take care of itself. But it was, it made me just kind of stop and think about, I guess I use this kind of, I do coach like this. And what if I do use internal focus, how is that maybe possibly screwing somebody up who I should try to think more of like an external, focus cue? Because I don't.
Well, but I mean, I think this is where, like the discussion in starting strength forums about the master cue comes in.
Right.
Like if you're working with someone on their squat and you've tried this, that, and the other, every which cue, and things don't seem to, you go to the master cue. The bar is just moving up and down in a squat over your midfoot. So there's your external cue.
There we go.
They've taken, okay, we tried this cue. We tried knees shoved out. We tried hip drive. We tried, whatever. Okay. The bar just needs to move up and down in a pretty straight line.
I pick things up. I put them down. And that's Diego's cue. Just pick it up. Except he uses an expletive sometimes to which I'm gonna keep this clean. But just pick it up. Just pick it up. And sometimes that really does work. Just pick it up. Yeah. I tell people a lot when they're getting in their heads about the deadlift. I said, just stand up.
Yeah. I said same thing works with squat.
The bar is in your hands. I said the reason the bar comes off the floor is because you're holding on to it. If you weren't holding on to it, it wouldn't come off the floor. They go, oh. I said, just stand up. And the bar will come with you because, you're holding on to it. If you let go, it will drop back to the floor. Gravity's like that, right? I mean, so it's like that whole get out of your head and just stand up. One of the summaries of in the summary of the study, there was a knee extension. They did a exercise with knee extension and elbow flexion, and one of the external focus cues was focus instructions was get the weight up. The internal focus was squeeze the muscle. Yeah. Well, I mean, and that was also interesting too. If you looked at sort of the designation of who the participants were, because those cues were given for untrained men. Mm-hmm. Some of these other cues were for people who already had some resistance training. Right. But that's like pretty darn basic. Just get the weight up. Yeah. Squeeze, as opposed to squeeze the muscle, right? And then you go up to the one that's the leg extension, where there's some people who have participated in resistance training before, and therefore are likely to have some familiarity with their muscles. So the internal cue was contract the vastus medialis oblique while generating maximal effort. I mean, who the hell would ever say that? But it wasn't while, it was whilst generating. It's an English study. Exactly. Whilst generating maximal effort. Yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing. It's like even trained people can just sometimes go, just pick it up. Untrained people, pick it up. And we were talking about this beforehand because it's like the whole concept of someone, getting the instruction to contract the vastus medialis oblique, whatever. Right. But I have worked with trainers in a commercial gym where I work who ask me questions along these lines. Like they'll say, what do you do with your clients to get them to focus on using their glute med instead of their glute? And I'm like, I don't know. You just tell them and I'm back to these sort of strength cues that are movement based and like sort of maybe more holistic and external cue based, as opposed to trying to get somebody who's just in off the street and just needs to move and build some strength, hyper focused on which muscle they're using. Because I've seen too many people who are already in that mindset it's like sometimes people even get like afraid to move because they think they're not using the right muscle. It's like, I'm doing it and it's fine. I have a couple clients who do ask, they ask good questions. They ask a lot of questions. And sometimes they say, well, what muscles am I actually working? So I just grab a book that I have. It's a strength training anatomy and it's an awesome book. And I open it up, I go, these muscles. And they go, oh, I'm like, all of it. Okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, and I guess, the reality of the situation is you're doing these barbell exercises. It's not like you're using any one of those muscles in isolation. No. So you don't need to know which one specifically. Right. You're using this group of muscles and other group of muscles. Now, sure, if you're a bodybuilder, you're going to want to know, okay, what exercise is going to best target the long head of the, whatever. That we don't worry about that. That's not our game. Our game is building strength, and we're going to use these exercises and we're going to perform them this way, and you're using everything. I just say that. You're using all of it. Everything. If
Everything.
if your legs don't hurt when you're pressing, you're not using it. You're not using your legs. If your legs don't hurt when you're benching, you're not using it's your whole body. So, I don't care what muscle, where should I be feeling this? Well, everywhere. Well, now I'll stay with like Romanian deadlifts. Let's say if I'm trying to teach somebody that if they're having a hard time learning how to hinge. If you don't feel it in your hamstrings, if you don't feel it in the back of your legs, you are doing it wrong. That's again, like you should feel that because that's the way you perform the exercise correctly. Now, what else is being used, I don't care.
Yeah, in a situation like that, though, I think what happens a lot of times is you get people who have these wonky movement patterns where instead of doing a hip hinge, they're doing like a spinal flexion, right? So in that case, right, there is like to focus on one particular muscle group like that to make sure that the movement is happening correctly or in the desired way is helpful. But in general, once they kind of get that hip hinge as opposed to back flexion
or knee bend or just kind of squatting. I like that. I like people who do that. And like, you feel that in your hamstrings? No, I said because you're doing it wrong. Here, we're going to do it right, and then you're going to feel it. Oh, that's a different story. And like, yes, it is. Different. That was different. Yeah. And then they can't do it, and that's just more of a movement pattern. That is, I don't know how to hinge. I haven't learned where to actually move from. But that's, but other than that, I'm not going to talk about what muscles you're using when you press. I'm going to kind of stay away from that as cues for you. I want, we're gonna focus on just how we are performing the exercise, how we're holding the bar. And I might touch the person. I want you to hold the bar and support the bar with your back. What does that mean? I grab their shoulders. Like, you need to feel this. It needs to feel this way. And I'll just basically put them in that position. Keep putting them in that position until they understand, oh, this is how I have to hold the bar. This is what it means when I'm holding the bar with my back versus the bar sitting in my hands, right? That's, I guess there's some internal, external going on there.
Yeah, but even the way you're describing that, it's like very tactile, which is an external thing.
Yes.
Right. You put them in that position, you're poking them in the back, like this is the part you're supposed to feel work, but you're not naming specific muscles.
I mean, and it's interesting to watch like people. I mean, my basic training class, I'll give people lateral raises and front raises, because it's why not build some shoulders, and I do that. I do shoulder work. Watching someone try to perform a lateral raise or a front raise with like a 5-pound dumbbell, and they have no clue what's actually working. When they're doing that, you see just the shoulders constantly pop up.
So you can't see this, but like what Emily is demonstrating is actually really that, like, oh my God, I'm nervous. My shoulders are creeping up to my ears, like a shrug.
Yeah, and that's somebody it's like, how do I cue that? How do I cue somebody to like not lift their shoulder? But that thing that happens with the squat or with the press. The tension, people put the tension up here as opposed to where they need to put the tension. So then I might have to say, your lats are down here. You've got muscles here. This is what's doing. Or have you ever done a lat pull down? Yeah. When you've pulled down, you know that feeling that feeling that you had when you pulled it down. That's how I want you to hold the bar. I mean, it is interesting to like watch people move and get them to figure out how to move their bodies, because that's really what it comes down to. It's like, I don't need to talk about muscles. I need to talk about put them in the right position, make them do the exercise the correct way. So like put my hand on their back, have them do the lateral raise and keep pushing their shoulder down so they start to feel exactly what it is. Or when they're doing a row and they're rowing up with their shoulder, push their shoulder down, put my hand on their actual back, move their arm in the right way. So it's literally the tactile cue, moving them in the proper way. That's how they're going to understand what.
You're describing it like they're marionettes.
Well, sometimes I feel like that. Because I'm a dance teacher. I was a dance teacher for how many years? I was a dancer for how many years? You think my dance teacher didn't come up to me and like put her hands on me and put me in the position I was supposed to be in? That's what you do to a young dancer. I would tell my parents that all the time. I'm going to put my hands on your kids, and when I have to, and I'm going to, because I can't get a student I have to put the shoulder down if they're holding their arm out in like second position, because the shoulder's going to creep up. So the same thing with my adults. I got to put them in that position in order to understand how to move their body correctly. All the cues I can give them verbally are great, but then there's sometimes you have to just do something. You have to get physical.
Oh boy.
Right? That's a whole other chart. That's a whole other chart, I mean, that's important though. You have to, and I think you have to be comfortable, with having somebody help you figure out what the movement should feel like, because not everybody is kinesthetically, aware of their bodies. Not everybody can watch somebody and do what they do. That's where the tactile cue comes in, and you have to figure out, you as a coach have to figure out how do I perform? How am I going to cue this person the right way? A lot of it's just, shoulder down, my hand on their back, me moving their arms, if they're doing like a dumbbell row. So the dumbbell's not kind of popping up to their, their armpit. But I mean, that's a whole other, teaching them a whole other way of focusing on the movement. And then once I can get them in that position, then I can use an external cue, to help them. But even those exercises are a little different than like the barbell exercises, right? I mean, you're getting more like you're getting more into like individual, smaller joint exercises. Yeah. That require something a little different. And not everybody, people can't perform those well. Those are challenging movements.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I guess obviously not everybody is a natural athlete, and I'm not in that category myself, but it's also just funny sometimes how many people there are that have, I don't know, let's say even less awareness than I do of how to move, like say one joint without another one jumping in.
Right.
Like I had somebody pretty recently, like a general fitness client that was doing step ups with bicep curls, and there was like so much shoulder action going on with just like all I'm asking you to do is bend your elbow. If you're doing the step up, that part's fine. Now add this elbow bend, and like shoulders are all over the place, and I'm like, I just don't even understand that, because that seems like a pretty straightforward everyday kind of movement.
But it's not.
Like, yeah.
But also then you understand how the person is probably is moving in their daily life. And that's why there's people injure themselves so much. That's why, God, we could talk about this all day, but people poo-poo, strength training. You're going to hurt yourself deadlifting. You're going to hurt yourself squatting. Well, yeah, if you're going to hurt yourself, you do it incorrectly, and you have a moron coaching you who doesn't know how to do it. And there are plenty out there, but you learn how to do it correctly. You have just learned how to pick something up in your house you've learned how to pick your laundry basket up properly. You've learned how to pick, a box up off the floor. You've learned how to bend down in the kitchen to put the dishes away in the dishwasher.
How to pick up your pig feed.
Pig feed. Pig feed. You've learned how to do that. Telling somebody, oh, you're going to hurt yourself strength training. Well, that's somebody who's obviously, they're ignorant of what we're actually doing. And there are plenty of people, yes, who do not teach things properly, don't know how to teach it, but know the exercise, but can actually help the person, get into the proper position. So how people move, and so you think of how people move in the gym, they're probably moving that way too in real life. If you help them move better in the gym, and they do it consistently enough, they're going to start to move a little bit better in their daily lives. Oh, and they're not going to injure themselves as much outside the gym because they've just learned a better movement pattern. Right? They've got or they have an external focus now. Whenever I put the dishes away in the dishwasher, I'm constantly thinking about my hinge. Oh, got a hinge. Got to think about the hinge. Sometimes I do it. Sometimes I've done like a ballet move to do that, though. I've done a penché.
I don't know.
Penché means your leg is like up in the air behind you.
Oh yeah, that's something I do pretty frequently. In my daily life.
I do it sometimes when I load the dishwasher. Not often. Not often. So, so I think I'll have the link to the study. Again, Rebecca and I didn't want to spend too much time on this. It's a very short article. But you should check it out. Just kind of look through it yourself.
Yeah, and I think, the general idea is just if you're thinking about cues that work for you,
Yeah.
or you're working on a lift right now and the cues aren't working for you, like just sort of think whether it's internal or external, and then sort of focus on whether you can come up with an external cue to solve the issue, solve the movement problem, and try that. Might be more successful.
Exactly. And I think overall it showed that, a external focus had more was very beneficial to, improvements in strength.
And the thing was, it was not just like the acute improvements, like in the moment, but also like better efficacy over time.
Exactly.
Yeah, they kind of really nerded out on it.
Yeah, and I think I read it and I thought, well, hell, that's me. I do that. I mean, that's how I coach, and I know that's how you coach too. And I think that's also just the model that we use as well. But also just in working with many people over many years, you start to learn what works, and you start to get away from, people need to learn how to move better. So bogging them down with, this is going on in the body when you do this, help them to move better, help them to move that weight better, help them to get in a better position. External focus seems to help more with that than, getting them to learn how to squeeze the muscle the right way. So, and that's just showing off what I think. There are plenty of coaches who like to do that, trainers who like to do that. That wraps it up, I think. Yeah, for us. So. I think so. So if you've got questions,
over here in the corner, I think we've put my dog to sleep. I was trying to figure out what weird noise was my dog snoring.
He's like, I am so bored with this discussion. I'm gonna go to sleep. Better that than when we have to mute you because he's barking.
That's the thing, is that the Yippy dog was here all weekend, and so now he's exhausted.
That damn Yippy dog. That Yippy dog has ruined many a podcast, and many of wanting to do a podcast. I can't do it this weekend. The Yippy dog is here. So if you've got questions about what we talked about today, please let us know. If you want to read the article, of course, the link will be in our podcast notes. So take a look at that. And of course, you can always email us with questions or comments at Emily@5by3.com. That's FIVE, the letter X, the number 3.com. Or you can email Rebecca at
cornerstonestrengthmaryland@gmail.com.
We'll be back in another couple weeks. And we look forward to getting back out there and talking to you guys soon. Thanks again for joining us. Have a great week. Thanks, Rebecca.
Yeah, you too. Take care.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to 5x3 Radio with Emily and Rebecca. If you like our show and want to know more about 5x3 training, please visit us at www.5, that's FIVE, the letter X, the number 3.com. You can also find us on Facebook and Instagram. To learn more about Rebecca, please visit her website, cornerstonestrengthmaryland.com. Thanks for listening and have a great week.